Kaaba, the holiest place for every Muslim, the house that unites a billion hearts across the world. But what many don't know is that this holy house, the Kaaba, the house of Allah, has been attacked multiple times throughout history. Yes, the Kaaba was attacked several times by enemies. But the most painful truth is that most of those attacks came not from non-believers, but from Muslims themselves, from rulers chasing power, from rebels lost in pride, and from those who forget the holiness of their Lord's house. Armies marched toward it, catapult fire upon it, blood was spilled around it, and yet every time the dust settled, the Kaaba still stood unshaken, untouched, eternal, because no matter who raised their sword, Allah Himself defended His house. Today, we will journey through those dark chapters when the holiest place on earth was turned into a battlefield and see how the Kaaba survived every attack, protected not by the walls or armies, but by the will of Allah. Number 1. Long before Islam, in the land of Yemen, there lived a proud Christian ruler, Abraha. He built a grand cathedral in Sanas called Al-Qulas. Its white marble shone like pearls and its tower reached toward the sky. One day, standing before his creation, Abraha declared proudly, "This shall be greater than Kaaba itself. The Arab will leave Mecca and come here to worship." But when the Arab continued their pilgrimage to the Kaaba, ignoring his cathedral, Abraha's pride turned into burning anger. He shouted before his commander, "If they will not come to me, I will go to them. I will destroy their Kaaba stone by stone." And so he prepared a mighty army, 60,000 soldiers marching with elephants that shook the earth as they moved. At the front of the army stood a giant elephant named Mahmud, covered in armor, his tusks gleaming like swords. The Arabs had never seen such creatures before. When news spread that Abraha was marching toward Mecca, fear filled with city. People fled to the mountains, all except one man, Abdul Muttalib, the noble grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdul Muttalib went to meet Abraha himself. Abraha, sitting proudly on his throne, looked at him and said, "I have no quarrel with your people. I have come only to destroy your holy house." Abdul Muttalib replied calmly and faith shining in his eyes, "I am the owner of my camel, but Kaaba has its own Lord. He will protect it." Abraha laughed. "We shall see if your Lord can save his house from my army." The next morning, Abraha's army prepared to march toward the Kaaba, but something strange happened. When they tried to move the elephant Mahmud toward Mecca, he refused to step forward. They tried beating him, turning him, and shouting at him, but the elephant kneeled down and would not move an inch. And then the sky darkened. A sound like thunder rolled across the desert. From the heavens came tiny birds, ababil, flying in perfect formation. Each bird carried 3 small stones of baked clay on its beak and 1 in each claw. As they swooped over Abraha's army, they released the stone, and each stone struck with the force of lightning. Soldiers fell screaming, elephants collapsed, and armor melted as if touched by fire. Abraha himself was struck and fled back toward Yemen. His army shattered, his pride destroyed. When the dust settled, the Kaaba stood untouched, silent and shining under the desert sun. The people of Mecca looked upon it and wept. Abdul Muttalib raised his hands and said, "Indeed, the Lord of this house has protected it." That year was remembered forever, the year of elephant, the very same year when Prophet ﷺ was born. Number 2. The siege of Yazid armies. Year passed after the early days of Islam. Empires rose, rulers changed, but hearts were still tested by power and pride. When Yazid bin Muawiyah became Khalifa, many Muslims refused to give him allegiance. Among them was a brave man, Abdullah bin Zubair, the grandson of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and one of the noblest companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He stood before the Kaaba and said to the people of Makkah, I will never give my hand to a man who rules through fear and force. This is the house of Allah and I will not leave it. So Abdullah bin Zubair took refuge in Makkah, believing that no Muslim army would ever attack this city of the Kaaba. But Yazid's army marched toward Makkah led by Hussein bin Numayr, carrying catapults and fire. As the siege began, drums thundered, rocks shattered walls, and flames filled the air. The soldiers loaded their catapult with fireballs soaked in oil and hurled them toward the holy mosque. Fire rained down from the sky. The Kiswa, the black covering of the Kaaba, caught fire, its flame dancing in the night. The wooden beams of the Kaaba began to burn and fall, filling the air with smoke and ash. People screamed, running for shelter inside Makkah. Abdullah bin Zubair looked at the flame rising around the house of Allah. His eyes filled with tears, but his voice was firm. O Allah, they have set your house on fire, but your light cannot be burnt. As the siege dragged on, suddenly news spread like wind through the camp. Yazid had died in Damascus. Panic struck his army. Their leader was gone, their orders meaningless. The soldiers dropped their weapon and fled Makkah, leaving behind ruins and silence. When the smoke finally cleared, Abdullah bin Zubair stood before the damaged Kaaba. Ashes covered the holy ground. The wall was scared and blackened by fire. He raised his hand and said to his followers, if they destroy the house, then we shall rebuild it, not for kings, not for power, but for Allah. With his own hands, he began rebuilding it, brick by brick, following the original foundation laid by Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. The people joined him, working under the sun, reciting praises to Allah. And when the final stone was placed, Abdullah bin Zubair looked up at the new Kaaba and said softly, the fire of oppression has gone out, but the light of Allah will never fade. Number 3. Attack on Kaaba by Abdul Malik bin Marwan's order. After years of chaos, the Muslim world was divided. In Makkah, ruled Abdullah bin Zubair, a noble companion and respected across Arabia. In Damascus, ruled Khalifa Abdul Malik bin Marwan, a man of power and intelligence, determined to reunite the fractured empire. But there was one problem: two rulers, two centers of power, and one Kaaba. Pilgrims across the land now traveled to Makkah under Abdullah bin Zubair authority, not to Damascus. This weakened Abdul Malik's influence and his claim as Khalifa. To strengthen his rule, Abdul Malik even made a temporary agreement with the Byzantine Empire, who ruled from Constantinople. A Roman envoy bows before Abdul Malik and say, the emperor offered peace and gold. In return, you must not march against his borders. Abdul Malik, holding a map, looks up and replies, tell your emperor this, I do not seek war with Rome. My war is within my own house. So the two powers, once enemies, share a moment of peace, not for friendship but for strategy. Abdul Malik wanted to focus his strength not on Rome but on Makkah. He turned to his general Hajjaj bin Yusuf, a man feared across empire. Go to the Hijaz and Abdullah bin Zubair. Makkah must bow to one ruler. Hajjaj marched south with his army and surrounded the holy city once again. Catapults were set upon the hills, their aim fixed upon the Kaaba itself. Inside the city, Abdullah bin Zubair stood among his followers. He looked toward the house of Allah and said, this is not a battle of power, it is battle for truth. I will never raise my sword against Muslim near the Kaaba. If I must die, I will die beneath its shadow. The siege began. For days, the fighting continued. Many of Abdullah bin Zubair's supporters fled, but he remained, praying at night beside the Kaaba, sword in hand. When the final attack came, he fought alone until he fell, martyred in the courtyard of the holy house. News reached Damascus. Abdul Malik heard of Abdullah bin Zubair's death in silence. He ordered Hajjaj rebuild the Kaaba, but not as he made it. Restore it to the way it was before. Leave the part of Ismail outside, just as the Quraysh built it. So the Kaaba was rebuilt again, and that design remains to this day. Years passed. Empire rose and fell, but the Kaaba, though rebuilt, would face yet another storm. This time, not from a ruler's ambition, but from a people who called themselves Muslims, yet turned their sword against the very heart of Islam. Number 4. It was the year 317 AH. Thousands of Muslims from across the world had gathered for Hajj, men, women, children dressed in white circling the house of Allah in peace. But from the east death was approaching, wearing the disguise of faith. The attacker were the Qarmatians, a radical offshoot of the Ismaili sect. Their leader, Abu Tahir al-Janabi, ruled from Bahrain. He saw Makkah not as a holy city, but as a symbol of the power. He raised his sword and shouted, "They make pilgrimage to a house of stones, not to the truth. I will destroy their Kaaba and expose their false worship." His men rode in agreement, a twisted army of fantastic blinded by arrogance. These disguised themselves as pilgrims and moved toward Makkah during the days of Hajj. As the people performed tawaf around the Kaaba, the Qarmatians suddenly drew their swords, scream tore through the air, steel clashed against flesh. Blood flowed on the white marble of the Masjid al-Haram. Abu Tahir stood at the Kaaba door, laughing as his shoulder butchered the innocent. "Where is your Lord now?" he mocked. "Why does he not protect his house?" Bodies of men, women, children were piled high around the Kaaba. Even the holy Zamzam well was filled with corpses. Then came the unthinkable. The Qarmatians tore the black stone, Hajar-e-Aswad, from its place in the Kaaba's eastern corner. They broke it apart and carried away to their stronghold in Al-Ahsa, Bahrain. Before leaving, Abu Tahir stood on the Kaaba steps and shouted to the survivor, "This is the house of your Lord. Where is he now? I am your God today." For over 20 years, the Hajar-e-Aswad remained in the hands of Qarmatians, a trophy for their arrogance. It was around 952 CE, 22 years after it was stolen, when the Hajar-e-Aswad was brought back to Makkah. It was broken into 7 pieces, but every piece was kissed and placed gently back into its place with silver framing, when it remains to this day. And so the Kaaba once again stood complete. The last attack on the Kaaba was made just 50 years ago during the reign of King Khalid bin Abdulaziz Al Saud in the year 1979. It was the first day of Islamic year, 20 November 1979, when peace turned into terror inside the Grand Mosque of Makkah. Moments after Fajr prayer, gunfire shattered the Kaaba. A group of armed extremists led by Juhayman stormed the Haram, sealed the gates and shouted, "The Mahdi has appeared, follow us or perish." Juhayman, a former Saudi soldier from Najd, believed society had lost true faith. His followers had smuggled weapons inside coffins, pretending to carry bodies for funeral prayers, and now they took hundreds of worshippers hostage. Saudi forces surrounded the mosque but could not attack. No blood could be shed inside the Haram. Days passed in chaos and gunfire from minarets. Finally, the scholars issue a fatwa following forced to retake the holy place. A fierce battle followed. Tunnel shook, explosion roared, and Takbir echoed with gunfire. After 2 weeks, Juhayman's Mehdi was killed and the siege ended. Juhayman and his men were captured and later executed. Yet, through the fire and bullets, the Kaaba remained untouched, standing tall as if declaring, "You may fight around me, but you can never harm me." Empires rose and fell, yet the Kaaba still stands. From Abraha's elephant to Juhayman's guns, every storm faded, but the house of Allah never bowed. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel Ages and Empires.